Concludes questions for oral answer. I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Government Notice of Motion number 1 relating to Meridian Energy Limited.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that Meridian Energy Limited be a public organisation for the purposes of the standing orders. Mr Speaker, as a result of Meridian ceasing to be an SOE and becoming a mixed ownership model company, it's no longer subject to ongoing financial reviews by a select committee. To make Meridian continue to be the subject of financial reviews, it's necessary to use this process of tabling a motion in the House to deem Meridian to be a public organisation under standing orders. This means that when Meridian's annual report is tabled in the House, it's then referred to a select committee for financial review. Mighty River Power was deemed to be a public organisation in the same way following its IPO, and Air New Zealand goes through a similar process. And we intend to recommend that Genesis is treated in the same way following its initial public offering. This process is repeated for non-SOE companies at the start of each parliamentary term, but they can all be done together, of course, once Genesis is floated. The reason they're doing one at a time at the moment is simply because of the interaction of the cycle of the Select Committee hearings with the SOE floats. And Mr Speaker, of course, the Meridian Energy Limited that comes before the Select Committee will be a different sort of company because it will be subject to the scrutiny now of the private market, that is the share market, the shareholders, analysts, overseas experts and so on. And I'm sure the Select Committee will find that when Meridian Energy Limited turns up, it will be a higher performing company than it ever has been through its life as a company going back to the early 2000s when it was first created. And of course it's very important that it is well monitored because Meridian Energy is facing the same challenges as the other listed energy companies, and that is an increasingly competitive electricity market. And if there's one thing governments ought to have learned, it is that government is not a good 100% owner of companies who are working to be profitable in a competitive market. There is a time when it was relatively easy for Meridian to do well, particularly under the previous Labor government, where the market wasn't that competitive, the shareholder wasn't that demanding, and demand for electricity was growing consistently. However, that has all changed. Demand for electricity is now flat to falling, and that means that these companies are going to have to be considerably more competitive than they were. And Mr Speaker, there's no doubt that a competitive market is a better way to get results for the consumer and to get pressure on electricity companies to deliver better results for the consumer. That is innovation in the delivery of energy, of which we will see an awful lot over the next 4 or 5 years, the lowest efficient prices that can be generated, and better, more sustainable returns to shareholders. And I just want to give one example of how a more competitive market has delivered for New Zealand energy consumers. Security of supply has become much less of an issue than it used to be. For instance, in the 8 years of the last Labor government, there were 4 dry year emergencies out of those 8 years. 4 dry year emergencies where we had high-level intervention by ministers, we had campaigns with consumers to stop them using electricity, Under this government and more importantly, a more competitive electricity market, we've dealt with two extreme climate events very well. For instance, 2012 saw inflows into South Island hydro lakes that were the lowest recorded in the first 6 months of any year on record. And that was then followed in 2013 by the worst drought in 70 years. Two extreme weather events. Both of these were handled competently and effectively and efficiently by a more competitive electricity market. And if there's one thing that would certainly not work, it would be following the Green Party's New Zealand power policy. The Green Party's New Zealand power policy. For instance, I was asked today a question about whether falling demand should be reflected in prices not falling. Well, the New Zealand power policy guarantees that as demand falls, prices don't. And it guarantees that because it guarantees a return to the owners of the generating assets. So when the Labor Party get up, they should explain that point. They should explain how the New Zealand power proposal will handle falling demand. They should explain that, because in the absence of a better explanation, here's what will happen. As demand falls, prices are guaranteed not to fall. Guaranteed not to fall, Mr. Speaker. And that comes on top of the other aspect of the New Zealand power policy, which is the Greens emissions trading system policy, which Labor, in their efforts to try and distance themselves from the Greens, never mention now, but actually as part of the New Zealand power policy, the emissions trading system policy of the Greens will add $500 a year to household electricity bills, designed to drive down demand. So it will add $500 a year to power prices, but as demand falls, prices won't be able to fall. So that will be the worst of all possible worlds. So, Mr. Speaker, Meridian Energy will front up to Select Committee now that it's now that it's deemed, once this motion is passed, deemed to be a public organisation. They will be a sharper, more commercial company, better at delivering lower prices to consumers. And I invite members just to consider what would have been the future of Air New Zealand had the previous Labor government not floated some of it on the stock market.
Look, this debate is about the status of Meridian Energy, whether or not it should be declared a public organisation for the purposes of standing orders. It's not a general debate, and the members must confine their comments to the Meridian Energy and whether it should be declared a public organisation for standing orders.
Mr. Speaker, we're proposing...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I obviously understand that ruling, but I am clear that in the earlier part of the Finance Minister's speech, he spoke about the electricity market more broadly, and I would expect members on this side of the House will be able to do that as well.
Sure. Look, I'm just making it clear now, and the Minister has 2 minutes remaining to focus the last part of the speech specifically on what the Business Committee has allowed to happen, and I'm asking the Minister to continue.
Mr. Speaker,
the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Just a simple question then, Mr. Speaker. Given that you have ruled in the twilight period of the Minister's speech, this ruling, are other members going to be given the same level of scope as the Minister had in his first 8 minutes? I'm
just making it very clear that while the Minister has said things which are probably outside the scope of the bill by mentioning other things, there will be a little bit of latitude, but I'm not allowing that there's going to be a 10-minute speech, a general debate on these matters.
8 minutes is fine.
Order. The Business Committee has given permission for this debate to happen, and I think we'll confine our comments and our debate concerning specifically about what these 6 speeches are about. 10 minutes on the subject in hand. The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I do accept your ruling. The government, of course, is proposing that Meridian Energy be deemed a public organisation because it still remains 51% owned by the Crown, 85% owned by New Zealanders and 49% publicly floated. Mr Speaker, I support the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker.